Hi, it's Susan from Worldpeacefull, and today is the anniversary of 9/11. It's a significant anniversary in that it was a watershed. It moved not only the United States but the rest of the world from what was a relatively peaceful world order to a moment that galvanized intense fear and started to introduce the term of terrorism into the world media and narrative, and it divided the world against those who were of an Islamic type persuasion, because the people who were identified as involved in the events that brought down the Twin Towers and the attack on the Pentagon, etc., were Saudi nationals, Arab speakers. And for those who don't know anything about the Middle East, there are many different types of groups there. Some are Arab, some are Persian. There's various religious groups in that part of the world, but predominantly they're seen as Islamic. So Islamic terrorism was born. And then any sort of discourse around bringing the other side of that discussion to the table is typically poo-hooed down because the media jumps on board, and then people become identified en masse as terrorists. So any person walking down the street, a woman in a chowdhury, for example, which is covering of her hair, or a burqa, would be seen as a possible terrorist. I actually witnessed here in Melbourne when I went to a fairly white area, as much as I don't really like that sort of terminology, but let's just say it's a fairly suburban area where there's mostly middle income earning Caucasians living there. I lived there for a long time, so I know. I didn't see many Indians or what have you walking around. Occasionally they do, but so as I was sort of walking towards the escalator, I saw what was, interestingly enough, an Australian guy dressed in Islamic gear. So he had the hat, he had white robes, he was on the phone, I could hear his Australian accent. But what I noted was some people who were coming down the escalator as he was coming up, and I looked at the woman's face and it was sour as she looked at him as a terrorist, and it was really obvious. Now that's the damage that gets done when we group a whole lot of people under a banner of terrorism. It creates a division in the world. We're not coming at the event from a peacemaking perspective where we're seeking to solve the problem of what exactly happened to orchestrate an event like this. And because we're not given full information, information is withheld often under national security. Vital information is held under national security, which could change the whole dynamic of people's understanding of an event. I often say, as a peacemaker, anything that's coming to divide is coming from fear. Anything that brings us together in a space of understanding is coming from a place of love. You can always tell the peacemakers as they seek to illuminate the other side. They seek to bring in information that de-escalates hatred towards a group. Jane Elliott, the famous Texan educator I've talked about in videos, and I've also posted her work on the Blue-Eyed, Brown-Eyed series, where she divided the children by eye colour. It was based on Nazi Germany, where the Aryan race saw itself as superior, and this was reinforced by Hitler. So blue-eyed, blonde-haired, like the way I look, was seen as superior. And what Jane Elliott did as a primary school teacher or elementary school teacher over in the US, she experimented with the children. This is a real educator. She divided them by eye colour. So the brown-eyed, green-eyed children, she even labelled them too. They had to wear collars. And the children who were blue-eyed were the chosen few. These were in the scenario she created, these were the more intelligent, superior. These were the ones that always did it right. They got privileges. The ones who were the brown-eyed, green-eyed were denied privileges. They were told they were not very intelligent. They were put down. They were excluded. They were marginalised. And this is how discrimination works. You can apply this scenario to anything where you look upon another as less than you, or you look upon another as better than you. Discrimination may be happening on a very subtle level. You may not even know that you're discriminating, but you just avert your eyes from that other person. You may make a very quick assessment that they look like a problem, yet if you entered into a conversation with them, you might find it quite different. So as a public, we have to educate ourselves to become more mindful of events when they happen and not to jump on popularist bandwagons where we demonise a group or we set up gangs, because I know there was fighting with young people who were fighting against this group. I don't believe in being blinded by taking sides myself. When I sit back and in fairness look at situations, I see discriminations happening in both camps. It's whenever we divide ourselves from someone. We all do it in every country on the planet. We all do it. But those who have access to more resources can dominate, if you like, the media message to position one group as better than another group. And then they are demonstrating more wealth and so forth. They are the successful group. We see that in the promotion of systems on the planet that we see as more prosperous, or we ignore those who aren't prosperous at all and we see them as failures. And this is coming out of ideology, which also divides. We might also have a religious belief that sees our way as the only way and all other ways are clearly wrong. Therefore, we feel a duty upon ourselves to educate those others because we really care for them. That's another division, because I know better than you. It can also be intellectual. I've got all the facts at my disposal. You don't seem to know anything. You're ignorant. I know what I'm talking about, and I can give you all the facts. Therefore, I win the argument over you, and I feel a sense of power. I won't tell you that, but inside I'm smiling because I won the fight. This is how powerlessness operates. A person feels powerless, will seek to place power over another through a superior knowledge, through tenure, through positional power, through gender-based power, through racial power, through religious power. They will have the upper hand. They will be part of a bigger group. And then we get groupthink in around that, where everybody agrees with that narrative. They speak it over a long period of time and it becomes what they perceive as the truth. I'm right, you're wrong. These are the dividers in our world. We've attempted to bring systems to the fore in order to create what some people perceive as freedom. Freedom and prosperity are up for a discussion. What is true freedom? Is it the freedom of speech? Is true freedom self-determination, where you can just do whatever you're feeling your move towards? Is it the freedom to harm others? Is it the freedom to control the media? Is it the freedom to mind control? Is it the freedom to bring in industrial systems or to bring in IT systems without public discussion when it impacts their life? Some will state that if a situation is impacting you, you have a right to say something about it. So things like rights and responsibilities are often places of tension as competing experiences, different ways of seeing the world clash it up in our world, and they seek to win the argument. We typically have the scenario of win-lose, not win-win. Conflict resolution is an area where we seek to bring parties together who have different and diverse views, who are in conflict. We get them to learn to listen to one another on either side. They ask questions of one another in a forum that's peaceful. They then together work out the options that they could go through to possibly solve this problem that they have between them. Then they come together and they work on the solutions and come to what is perceived as a wise agreement. This is called collaboration. I would call it compassionate collaboration because it shows respect. When we no longer respect other people, we've lost connection to our humanity. When we no longer feel empathy for other human beings, we've lost connection to our humanity. When we no longer love that other unconditionally, we have lost our connection to our humanity. When we no longer speak the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth as a form of clarity, so that all parties know what the state of play is from this perspective, we lose connection to our humanity. The highest respect is to speak the truth to another party. The videos that I'm doing, I wouldn't really put in the realm of an activist, although I'm active in communicating my freedom, which is what I have intended as a higher perspective and for the highest good. I may not be agreed with, and that's fine. That's called freedom. I'm not here to convince others to agree with me. I am not here to say that I am better than you. We're diversity. Sometimes the person who can be the most difficult person can be the greatest teacher because others have to respond. They have to get up. They have to state who they are in relationship to this situation that's untenable for them. So they become a salient teacher. That's why I always see a teacher, I never see an enemy, because they're teaching me, they're forcing me to go and educate myself about these events, such as 9/11. I'm also going to be talking today about extrajudicial killings, targeting of civilians. 9/11 event is a targeting of civilians. I'm also going to be talking about the incarceration of those who have been seen as combatants, who were civilians, innocent civilians being targeted. So the theme of these videos is going to be the targeting of civilians. 90% of fatalities in war are civilian casualties. Now, what enables these scenarios to happen is the blindness of greed, the ambition to have what you want, and totally disregard the consequences. It's a form of pathological cooperation, and it's being called that at the highest levels. These coming together of those with great power to formulate worlds in their views, to dismantle structures that have been built up over hundreds, if not thousands of years, in order to create peace and security on our planet. What is at stake in the time that we're living through right now is these very, very important freedoms that we've all taken for granted, such as freedom of speech, such as the freedom to walk down the street unaccosted, such as the freedom to not have someone raid my home and steal my things, the freedom of not having intelligent electricity as a LAN network accessing my computer. That was prior to the imposition of smart meters. I also advocate for the freedom to not be monitored everywhere I go as if I'm in a regime that is seeking total control. because any form of surveillance is a form of bullying. I'm also got a background in anti-bullying. I taught anti-bullying in the schools. So whenever somebody is being overly stalked or monitored or in any way restricted, intimidated, controlled on some level, information being withheld, physical violence being threatened, verbal violence being asserted, which is demonising, putting down, undermining, these all form bullying, which is a form of a toxic culture, which becomes normalised. We go to work and we have bullying incidences where people are undermining others because they don't want to be seen to be bullying. And that undermining, the covert bullying, is the most deadly because it's done on a very subtle level and it causes what they say in the literature is crazy making. It's a silent war. And that silent war works on weakening you. It works on exploiting that weakness. It works on feeling a sense of power because that other doesn't know what's going on around them. And that other might be driven to the point of suicide as a result of this undermining, as a result of this unwanted attention, as a result of gathering data around them in order to target them. This silent war can be dropping in narratives in the media to expect disruptions to one's life. It can be dropping in narratives into the media to say that when someone puts down one group, that that's okay, that they have freedom to do that if it's harming another. And I've witnessed that here in Australia. I won't go into the issue, but I'm very clear in my mind of the bandwagon that created around this public tweet when it was actually putting down a group of people and it got supported at a higher level. These then become ideological dispositions seeking to push their view on the public from positions of power where the public have typically taken on board those because they have positional power. And people have been trained to obey that authoritarian, that positional power because they know better than me. So covert bullying sets up a situation of one group against another. It might do things very silently, like deny rights. And this is all within, in the case I'm sort of putting to you, is a democratic type scenario where we have typically stated that everyone has a right to say what they want. They have various freedoms. And I think that's a good lead into my quick discussion on what is democracy, because I think we're losing it most definitely. And those who are actually orchestrating it will also jump on those bandwagons. They go, yes, we're losing democracy. We really think we should keep it, even though they may well be actively involved in the dismantling of it. They make out they're on the side of supporting it. So that idea of wolves in sheep's clothing, people have to be very aware of, and it's very hard to sift through that because it certainly looks like it's fine on the surface. But underneath there are agendas going on, and I don't wish to fill people with too much concern about that other than do not be quick to jump onto bandwagons. I've also had my own sacred cows, if you like, exploded, where I really believed in certain people. When I came to find through research, they were not the people I thought they were. I got shocked when I realised that those who I thought were of very high principle were not of high principle at all. So I'm now looking at things in a more sceptical way, not in a cynical way, but more sceptical. I don't believe things on the face of it anymore. I'm now starting to look deeper. So with that, I'll talk about democracy, because we don't seem to understand it, and we certainly don't know that we're in danger of losing it for sure. And I would say rather than let it go, we have to reinvigorate it, because it is a very important basis for harmony in a society and for you to achieve the goals that you're here to achieve in your lifetime. So representative democracy is a form of government founded on the principles of popular sovereignty by the people's representatives. The representatives are charged with the responsibility of acting in the people's interests. That's why we talk about the public interest. They're supposed to be representing us, not other parties. The representatives are charged with the responsibility of acting in the people's interests, but not as their proxy representatives, not necessarily always according to their wishes. That's interesting, but with enough authority to exercise swift and resolute initiative in the face of changing circumstances. It is often contrasted with direct democracy, where representatives are absent or are limited in power as proxy representatives. That's interesting. The representatives are chosen by the majority of the voters, in brackets, as opposed to the majority of the population eligible voters in elections. While existing representative democracies hold such elections to choose representatives, in theory, other methods such as sortition, more closely aligned with direct democracy, could be used. Also, representatives sometimes hold the power to select other representatives, presidents or other officers of government, indirect representatives. A representative democracy that also protects liberties is called a liberal democracy. One that does not is an illiberal democracy. There is no necessity that individual liberties are respected, in a representative democracy. I'm pausing on that because I'm thinking about it. For example, the communist states were technically representative democracies who regularly held elections but did not respect real liberties. Well, that's an interesting statement, isn't it? Certainly in our society, there's been liberties that have not been respected. There's a bit of a bias inherent. That's from Wikipedia. I'm just sitting with it for a minute. My inner feeling is that they should be representing our interests 100%. We should be getting polled a lot. I used to do polling, and it's amazing the views of people. And what I found is there's common sense in the commons. Some might see the commons as just the commons, the masses. They're actually not. There's a lot of wisdom because they have harder lives and they have to face a lot of problems that they overcome. They're also more humbled because they are seen as just another person. They're not being given all this power. They're not being pumped up. So that's why when you get and talk with people in the public, they're usually very friendly and easy to get along with for the most part. I mean, behind closed doors, of course, there's other issues, but let's just say in the main, people are not too full of themselves. They just live in their lives. Today in liberal democracies, representatives are usually elected in free, secret ballot, multi-party election. The power of representatives in a liberal democracy is usually curtailed by a constitution. As in a constitutional republic or a constitutional monarchy, or other measures to balance representative power. So the Constitution is to actually protect the people from corruption. So their power is curtailed by that Constitution. Now, if that Constitution is not being upheld, if there's corruption in that society, if the courts are interfered with, or particular people are selected, then we're going to see the perversion of justice happening, and that then creates a discord in that society when it can see that the very values that have been put to it are not lived, are not upheld by representatives, and are not reinforced by those who would be seen as the arbiters, the mediators, the court system. People then lose faith because that way of organising, that way of seeing your society with various freedoms, if that's dismantled, then you're not going to be believing in it, and those at the top. It goes on to say there are other measures to balance representative power, such as an independent judiciary, which may have the power to declare legislative acts unconstitutional. I haven't seen any of that in Australia. Not that I'm across the Supreme Court, I'm not. We also need to know, is there any equity financing in the court system where other interests from other countries have equity, that is money, in that court? If it becomes a business, how does that become accountable to the public? If it's a corporation, how does it stay neutral? Who's on the board of that corporation? See, there's complicated issues as we see privatisation coming in to representative democracy. Something to keep in mind. It goes on to say that it may also provide for some deliberative democracy. The example there is royal commissions, or direct democracy measures, initiative referendum, recall elections. However, these are not always binding and usually require some legislative action. Legal power usually remains firmly with representatives. In some cases, a bicameral legislator may have an upper house. We do in Australia. I don't know if Queensland does. I don't think they do. That is not directly elected, such as a Canadian Senate, which was in turn modelled on the British House of Lords. The term republic may have many different meanings. Today it is often simply means a state with an elected head of state, such as an Islamic Republic of Iran or the former German Democratic Republic. It may also have a meaning similar to liberal democracy. For example, the United States relies on representative democracy, but its system of government is much more complex than that. It's not simple representative democracy, but a constitutional republic in which majority rule is tempered by minority rights, protected by law. Although those rights are not always protected if you can't access the legal system. If there is discrimination in that system towards a particular group, they're going to be seen as undeserving, unworthy, as less. And when those discriminations become normalised, inequities occur and biases occur. So the minority rights are not always protected, and that's what I've found. Certainly with homelessness, I've learned a lot since I became homeless. I wanted to experience the truth. That is one of my interests. And the best way to experience the truth is to live it. And we most definitely have discriminations on the basis of how you are seen. And there are narratives around whether you're working or not working that would be seen as contributing, giving back, all this sort of thing. But not understanding there are structural reasons why people become unemployed. There's also global market reasons why they can't get a job, and there's also technological change. They may not be able to afford to educate themselves or keep up with the changes, or they may not want to work. And as far as I'm concerned, in a democracy, everyone has a right to choose the life they have, and I don't think they should be penalised if they don't choose to work full-time. But then those that have an interest in that would most definitely be communicating messages that this group is less than the other group in order to encourage the bigger group not to become that group. People get jealous too because they think they've got more leisure time, they're having fun, and we're not. We're stuck at work. So yeah, there's a whole lot of underlying issues with all of that. Having worked in 400 companies myself, seen it all. Now, the other form of democracy is participatory democracy. It is a process emphasising the broad participation, in brackets, decision-making of constituents in the direction and operation of political systems. I like that. While etymological roots imply that Any democracy would rely on the participation of its citizens, in brackets the Greek demos and kratos, combined to suggest the people rule. That's why in the US we hear the terms we the people. I've written poetry on we the people just recently, and I've done a blog on it, video blog. Traditional representative democracies tend to limit citizen participation to voting, leaving actual governance to politicians. Participatory democracy strives to create opportunities for all members of the political group to make meaningful contributions to decision-making and seeks to broaden the range of people who have access to such opportunities. Because so much information must be gathered for the overall decision-making process to succeed, technology may provide important forces leading to the type of empowerment needed for participatory models. Yeah, it's an interesting statement. Especially those technological tools that enable community narratives and correspond to the accretion of knowledge. Well, that's a pretty verbose statement. And I'm actually feeling I'm not really comfortable with this Wikipedia analysis. Why would? I'm just going to analyse that. Because of much information must be gathered for the overall decision-making process to succeed. So much information must be gathered. Well, is it a question of a lot of information being gathered, or is it intelligently cherry-picking the data that they need in order to make decisions and looking at it from a qualitative and quantitative perspective? I was a market analyst, so qualitative means getting amongst the people in focus groups, discussions. It's more depth information. It's more emotional. You can feel the room. You're actually with the people. It's more three-dimensional. The quantitative analysis is typically statistical, where in a questionnaire we'll circle numbers and then we quantify those numbers. We get percentages of this out of 100%, 20%, 30%, whatever. It gives us a feel for what people are saying, but much depends on how those people read those questions, how they've interpreted the questions, whether the questions were unbiased, whether we're dealing with a similar socialised group who have similar understandings of the meaning of those words. So there's a lot to data gathering. The position of each question, is the question leading? So it's pushing them towards an answer, not really their true free will. People won't know because they're not trained. So it goes on to say here that so much information must be gathered for the overall decision-making process to succeed. You've also got expertise within bureaucracies that's being lost. So some of those long-term bureaucrats would be a great source of knowledge, providing that they're experienced and not politicised. That's why it must be neutrality in the bureaucracy. But then are we cherry-picking certain people to take those jobs because they're favourable towards our ideology? See, this is where the human corruption comes in. We're not able to function in such a way that we have these very strong sets of values and we adhere to truth, we adhere to responsibility and things like that. So that's just something to keep on board. So it also is talking about the technology may provide important forces leading to the type of empowerment. Well, I don't know what that statement means. Maybe the access to be able to put in electronically your information needed for participatory models. So maybe that's allowing the public to speak. But then what if that data is interfered with through hackers? What if questions are written, as I said, in such a way that skews the information? Especially those technological tools that enable community narratives. And I think maybe visual images are better for the community narratives, videoing, so you can actually see the people and hear what they say. Some scholars argue for refocusing the term participatory democracy on community-based activity within the domain of civil society, based on the belief that a strong non-government public sphere is a precondition for the emergence of a strong liberal democracy. These scholars tend to stress the value of separation between the realm of civil society and the formal political realm. I think personally there needs to be a lot of public involvement. There needs to be forums that are regular across all different areas. there needs to be a direct way of being able to communicate, and that can be done electronically, but it's because of the times we're in, I'm very skeptical about it now that I see the intelligence agencies and the Google and the various Facebook, YouTube, what have you, gathering data, not in the benefit of the people, but because they want to push forward business interests through advertising. So we're fraught with a lot of issues right now because our values are not centred on truth, on compassion, on democracy, responsibility, accountability. These have to be integrated into people, not just narratives we use in order to make everyone feel comfortable. So I'll leave this section like this now, and then I will go now to the next section, which is going to be about targeting of civilians. And I'm then going to talk about 9/11, the targeting of civilians, and I'm going to talk about other subject matter to do with Guantanamo Bay. Thank you.